May 25th, 1979, Friday, Chicago Airport, 1:30 p.m.
53-year-old Captain Walter Lux strides through the familiar halls of O'Hare Airport. The American Airlines pilot is in a great mood. The weekend is ahead, and he plans to spend it with his son Michael. He's almost out of the terminal, and soon he'll be home. But suddenly, a familiar voice pulls him out of his thoughts and makes him turn around. It's a fellow pilot.
Hey, Walter. Listen, my family has an important celebration today, but in an hour, I have to fly to Los Angeles. Could we switch flights? I can't miss the family event.
Walter knew that this request would ruin all his plans, but he couldn't refuse. He decided to call Michael to tell him that he wouldn't be able to spend time with him. This was the last call from father to son. The colleagues said their goodbyes, and Walter went to prepare for the flight. Captain Lux had been with the airline for almost 30 years and was a very experienced pilot. Today, he would command Flight AA-191 from Chicago to Los Angeles.
The first officer and flight engineer were already waiting for him in the briefing room. Together, they learned that the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 they would be flying today had undergone major maintenance less than 2 months ago. There were no records of any malfunctions in the May 24th logbook.
The fuel load would be maximum, and the total weight of the aircraft would be 172 tons, 66% of the DC-10's maximum takeoff weight. There would be 258 passengers on board.
Soon, the 10 flight attendants joined them, and the full crew headed to the aircraft. During the pre-flight inspection, nothing suspicious was noticed. Confident in the plane, the pilot entered the cockpit. At 2:50 p.m., the aircraft was towed to the engine startup point. 9 minutes later, it rolled onto the runway and stopped. A long gray strip and a clear blue sky stretched out before them. 4 hours of calm flight lay ahead. After one last check, control was handed to the young first officer, and the controller was contacted.
O'Hare Tower, American 191, on runway 32 right, ready for takeoff.
American 191, O'Hare Tower, wind 11.3 meters per second, visibility 24 kilometers, runway 32 right, cleared for takeoff. Have a good flight.
Conditions acknowledged, taking off. Thank you. Have a good shift too, American 191.
At 3:02 p.m., the throttles were pushed to maximum, and the plane began accelerating. 50 seconds later, the captain reported reaching V1 speed, decision speed, 257 kilometers per hour, the point at which the pilot must decide whether to continue the takeoff or abort.
Rotate,
said the first officer, pulling back on the control yoke. But suddenly the plane veered sharply to the left. The cockpit alarm blared.
Damn, we've lost engine number 1.
He cursed, catching the captain's attention. It was too late to stop. The plane was already airborne. The controller, watching the DC-10's takeoff from the tower, saw that engine number 1 left and its pylon had separated from the rear mount, flew over the front edge of the left wing, tearing off a meter-long section of it, and crashed onto the runway behind the plane. As the engine punctured the fuel tank, a white vapor trail from leaking fuel appeared behind the wing. Additionally, the electrical and hydraulic systems were damaged. This caused the slats on the left wing to retract slowly, depriving the plane of the necessary lift. The aircraft was in the air, but behaving very unstably. They were climbing, but very slowly, at a vertical speed of just 5.6 to 5.8 meters per second, half of what it should have been. The controller, realizing the critical nature of the situation, tried to contact the crew.
American 191, what's your decision? Are you returning to O'Hare, American 191?
The pilots didn't respond. They were too busy. The plane kept banking left, but the first officer was fighting with all his might to keep it level. The instruments showed engine number 1 failure, but in reality, the engine wasn't there. The pilots didn't know this, and were following the two-engine flight procedure. Because of the engine thrust asymmetry, the first officer was using the rudder to keep the plane straight. At 90 meters, they reduced speed to the minimum, 283 kilometers per hour. For now, things weren't so bad as the DC-10 could fly safely on two engines. But a new problem arose. There was no slat control on the left wing, so the plane wasn't getting the necessary lift. The slats on the right wing were functioning normally, but this only worsened the situation. The left wing stalled and the plane started banking left rapidly. The pilots completely lost control.
At 122 meters, the bank reached a 90-degree angle, meaning the wing was almost vertical relative to the ground. Those who witnessed this scene were horrified. At 3:04 p.m., less than a minute after takeoff, Flight AA-191 crashed into the ground at a 20-degree angle with its left wing in a Chicago suburb. The aircraft crashed directly into a trailer park where hundreds of people lived. The fully fueled tanks exploded, creating a massive fireball. The plane's debris scattered into nearby homes in the trailer park. This fiery nightmare was visible even from downtown Chicago. The rescuers, who arrived 10 minutes later, noted that absolute silence reigned at the crash site. There was no one to save. The crash claimed the lives of 273 people, 271 on board and 2 on the ground. 2 more people on the ground were seriously injured. 2 months before the crash, the DC-10 had undergone regular maintenance at Tulsa Airport in Oklahoma, USA. During one procedure, mechanics had to remove the engine from the aircraft. The aircraft manufacturer, McDonnell Douglas, recommended first removing the engine and then the pylon. This procedure took longer and was more costly. However, American Airlines mechanics decided to save time and money by removing the engines together with the pylons using a standard lift. This caused impact loads and microcracks began forming in the pylon mount. These cracks grew every time the DC-10 took off and landed over the next 2 months. During the May 25th takeoff, the connection failed and the engine fell off. On the other hand, the engine detachment from the wing shouldn't have necessarily led to a crash. The situation was significantly worsened by malfunctions in the hydraulic system. With the slats on the left wing retracted, lift was reduced, leading to a sharp left bank. During the investigation, experts conducted 70 takeoffs on a simulator, recreating the exact conditions the DC-10 was in that day. Experienced pilots tried to regain control of the plane, but time after time the aircraft crashed. The decision to reduce speed to the minimum, 283 kilometers per hour, was correct in the event of an engine failure. However, in the case of simultaneous engine and slat failure, this action was a fatal mistake. Neither the first officer nor the captain knew this. They hadn't been trained for such a scenario. During the investigation, 31 other aircraft were found to have metal fatigue in the same area of the pylon as the crashed DC-10. After this, the National Transportation Safety Board suspended the airworthiness certificate of all DC-10 aircraft for almost 1.5 months. As a result, 270 airliners were grounded. Airlines suffered massive financial losses. Only on July 13th, after numerous checks of the plane's technical condition, were American DC-10s allowed to resume regular flights. This disaster remains the deadliest by number of victims in U.S. history. It is also the second deadliest involving a DC-10. In the list of the deadliest air disasters in aviation history, it ranks 13th. The DC-10 had a bad reputation for numerous high-profile incidents caused by technical issues, earning the unofficial nickname Death Cruiser 10.